I have in front of me Ted Nicholas's newsletter collection from 1993 to 1997. And what's fascinating about these newsletters is that he was able to reach thousands of prospects for his copywriting programs in a way that works today. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. Ted Nicholas is a copywriter who promoted himself through newsletters and information products. So he promoted his ability to write for companies and also his ability to coach copywriters. He did this through a prospect newsletter and a paid newsletter. Now, this archive that I have here is actually his paid newsletter, and I bought it a couple years ago, probably from his company, but ultimately it contains a number of years of newsletter articles. And what Ted Nicholas did was he went speaking in front of groups, built his mailing list, and then offered products or the newsletter as a service to build up some kind of buyer. That initial buyer then had the opportunity to see through the newsletter and his different products examples of copywriting he has done for other people. And then very often a small percentage of the copywriters or the people who had bought his products raised their hand and asked Ted Nicholas to do copywriting for them. Now, he, again, used speaking, and the speaking drew people into an email newsletter. That was his prospect newsletter. And the email newsletter elevated them to some kind of print newsletter. Now, what he's doing works today significantly well, especially since a lot of media companies online are starting to implement more of these privacy laws. So if you're not aware, consumers can opt out of most tracking on the internet. And that means pay per click. It's a little bit harder to target a complete picture of people on the internet. And also there's things like shadow banning, or you can drop out of a search engine because somebody's just done better SEO or flooded the market. What Ted Nicholas did back in 1993, I had just got out of high school, and he's doing this stuff for years before this newsletter, was that he was also renting mailing lists and sending out offers on a mailing list. He did it through a two-step marketing. So he'd rent a mailing list, and he would then send out a postcard. He'd send out a letter, get somebody to raise their hand that they're interested in a product or a service. Then he would then offer the product to the individual. He would also rent and borrow or trade other people's mailing lists to do the same thing. Sometimes he had full-page ads in the back of magazines. Sometimes he had articles in other people's newsletters. Now, how do I know he was doing this? Well, on a number of occasions, I've seen Ted Nicholas speak at events. So I went to some events in Florida. I've gone to events all over the country and saw him speak. And Ted Nicholas actually described what he was doing. And as I'm reading through this newsletter archives, he describes what he's done. So, for example, I see here these are how to make card decks pay. So there used to be these things called card decks. It was basically a giant stack of index cards, and they had little advertisements on them. They still exist today in the industrial marketing world. And it's a great place for you to take tested offers to generate leads. And then once you generate leads, you send them a newsletter, you sell them a newsletter, you sell them a product, you sell them a book, anything to get that initial sale. And now that they're a customer, then you can start cultivating that customer relationship. Do you kind of see how this works? So there are things that were done in the past that work today. Now, when you go out and do a pay-per-click, you are essentially renting a mailing list because you're showing your ad to a specific demographic, and then based on your response to that demographic, you can roll out to other areas. But you can still rent magazine mailing lists. You can still rent email mailing lists, which I don't recommend doing, but there are ways of using email mailing lists. And you have actually more ways available to you. The fundamental that I wanted to explain here, though, is that Ted Nicholas has a system for getting customers. Now, he's passed away, and so he's not actively doing this, but I do know that hundreds of other marketers are using the same two-step model to get leads and then to make specific offers. And I also know that a number of copywriters create supplemental income or at least cover their marketing costs by having books, reports, and a paid newsletter. Now, if you're interested in doing any of these things with your own copywriting business, please ask your questions and I'll make sure that you're pointed to the resources that we have that help you do this. But understand this, if you're writing a newsletter every month about topics, you can actually test those topics to see which ones are of interest to potential buyers of your services and then expand on the topics that generate actual clients. So you can create content that is generating leads and test it to determine what content creates customers. Now, it doesn't matter where the content lives, as long as that content is put in front of a qualified prospect. Please listen very carefully here. That has worked for hundreds of years. Put an ad in the newspaper that people call in on the telephone line and request free information. The free information goes out and offers a product or service. Do you understand this? 2 steps. So right now, I know a lot of people are putting content on their website and then they sit around and wait for someone to show up from a search engine or for someone to go through a pay-per-click and there's no real opt-in. I know individuals who have print newsletters that they send out haphazardly. I'm one of those people at times. I have a print newsletter that I don't get out the door all the time that I'm supposed to. And it hurts the business. You really have to be consistent about it. You also want to have the testing of themes and stories on a constant basis. So if you're going to use a 2-step method, rather than writing a 2,500 word feature article, you can outline that article, do an audio presentation on that from the outline, write a lead generation piece to drive people to basically receive the featured article. So you didn't really have to write the feature article. You could talk about a topic for 10 or 15 minutes, have it transcribed, have all that available, and so somebody opts in and then they immediately get that product of value. You can take that product of value and recycle it later to make it a book, to recycle it to make it a special report. We talk about special reports a lot. But you don't have to have 50,000 pieces of copy in order to get the clients that you're looking for. So learn from Ted Nicholas. Anytime you can get Dan Kennedy, Ted Nicholas, Joe Sugarman, all of these classic copywriters, and see what it is that they did before the internet, before digital and mobile technologies, you'll very often see methods that work across all mediums. Now you create that lead generation piece. You don't just put it online. You form it in a letter and send it out to a mailing list. You rent a mailing list and send it out. You offer it as an advertorial so that it's put in somebody else's mailing list. And there's examples in the Robert Collier letter book. There's examples in My Life in Advertising or Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins. There's How to Make Your Advertising Make Money by John Caples. And you might be saying, well, Justin, man, those are old. I need to learn the latest search engine optimization. No, you need to learn the foundations of marketing. The 2-step method where you take a large list, offer something for lead generation purposes, a very low ticket, very low commitment type of item. And then when people raise their hand, you only make your offer to the people that raise their hands. It's going to save you a fortune. It's the right way to reach people. And then it doesn't matter what media you use, as long as you're reaching your target prospects. We have to know that the target prospects are fragmented today. Some of them are online. Some of them are offline. Some of them watch YouTube on their television in their living room. Some of them watch YouTube in front of their computer. So if you make an offer in a YouTube video, they aren't going to necessarily be able to right now click and go someplace if they're watching it on their TV. If they're watching it on their computer, yes, sure, that maybe they can go down in the comments and they can click. And I make this mistake sometimes by saying, click the link below to join our mailing list or newsletter. And you have to understand this. You're not going to reach everybody, but you can take that same message and put it in multiple mediums in order to reach a larger majority of those people who are targeted in your audience. And let's say you create a YouTube video and it does have a good lead generation conversion. Then you want to add some pay-per-click to it. You want to send out a postcard campaign and point to it. You want to incorporate it in your newsletter. You want to do all these other things to drive. I hope you understand what I'm saying here. I hope you're paying close attention, that it's not about quantity of materials you create, because the foundation of what works in marketing is about the quality of the materials, and that quality material in front of the right prospect at the right time. Now, if you need some help on this, be sure to ask questions. I'm Justin Hitt from Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. You can visit us at www.adbriefings.co.uk. And of course, just go to the contact page and contact us with your questions. The more you can give me a little background about the question, the better the response will be. But ultimately, there is nothing new when it comes to copywriting. There's always something that can be borrowed, can be adapted, can be taken out of one medium and put in another medium. The faster you understand that there's this library of material out there that can inform you on how to reach the right prospect and buyer, the less likely you'll fall for the latest and greatest. I don't know if you remember MySpace or AOL or any of that stuff, but the online world is constantly new stuff, just like fax marketing and 900 numbers and all that stuff was the new of the historical world. You have to look at the stuff that's worked consistently and borrow from that, because if you can get it in front of the right audience and you can measure their responses and track the conversions, you can do what's called math to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. Thank you for listening. I'm always looking forward to your questions. And this has been about Ted Nicholas's method for getting copywriting assignments. And it also, in his world, created additional streams of income. I'm here to help copywriters, marketers, and business development professionals create agencies and get all the customers you need. Thanks for listening.